The eighth stanza of Lycidas begins with a question asked by a river named Camus, who is mourning over the death of Lycidas, and that is shown with plants and weeds overgrown on the surface of the river. Camus asks who has taken my dearest child, and the reply is given by Saint Peter, who is at the gateway of heaven. And Saint Peter says that he really wished not to take the life of this young shepherd because there are so many others, especially in the church, as the clergymen and priests, who deserve a death better than this young man. So, this stanza shows the poet's disagreements with and criticism of the church, because the poet John Milton was a Puritan and was against the church. So we can see a lot of critical remarks and judgments made on the clergy and the church in general, um, through the words of Saint Peter. And this stanza is, in a way, a digression from the whole theme of the poem, which is to mourn the death of Lycidas. Let's see. So, in the first 5 lines of this stanza, we can see the question raised by Camus. Now, Camus, the term itself can refer to a genius of Cambridge or a person scholar from Cambridge, but here it also means to be the name of a river, uh, River Camus, and the river is shown to be footing very slow, and the mantle, the surface is hairy, overgrown with weeds, and the bonnet is full of sedge. Sedge is a plant that grows in marshy places, and this river is asking a question: who hath taken my dearest pledge, my dearest child? And the mourning of Camus is compared to the plant called hyacinth. Hyacinth is the sanguine flower inscribed with woe. So, just like the sanguine plant or flower inscribed with woe, or the hyacinth flower, which is a flower that is full of sorrow, the Camus, the river, is asking, who has taken away my dearest child? Lycidas. Now, hyacinth flower takes a mythological background. Hyacinthus was accidentally killed by god Apollo, and it is believed that Hyacinthus, um, on his death, his blood fell on a lily flower, so it was stained as purple. So the pure white lily flower was stained as a purple flower because of the death of Hyacinthus. And so this flower, this newly stained purple flower, is called hyacinth, and this is the mythological belief. So just like the white flower bloodied with death, now just like that sanguine flower inscribed with woe, Camus is asking, who has taken away my dear child Lycidas? And to this question, the reply comes from the pilot of the Galilean lake, and that is Saint Peter. He has two massy keys made of metals, one a golden one and the other an iron one. The golden key is used to open the gates, and the iron key is to shut it. And Saint Peter is shown to be like a bishop. Okay, he has mitred locks. Now mitred locks is the crown of the bishop, so Saint Peter is supposed to be the father of all bishops, right? So Saint Peter, looking like a priest, looking like a bishop, speaks: how well could I have spared for thee, young swain? Swain is shepherd. I wish I would have spared your life, O young shepherd Lycidas, because there are so many others who are waiting to get to this gate, who deserve a better punishment because of certain reasons. Now, four or five reasons are given here. One, figuratively, is about the shepherds who intrude and climb into the fold to fill their bellies. Now, traditionally and biblically, pastoral images are given to the church and the congregation. Now, the priest and the clergyman are considered to be shepherds, and the people, the believers, are considered to be sheep. So, usually, the shepherds do not eat away the food of the sheep because it is a duty of the shepherd to take care of the sheep. Now, if a shepherd intrudes into the folds of the sheep and takes away what is of the sheep in order to fill their own bellies, it is very wrong, and that is what happens in the church. So, the shepherd here figuratively stands for the clergyman, and the sheep here figuratively stands for the people, the believers. So, these people could have died rather than Lycidas. Okay, how well could I have spared for the young man, young shepherd? Because there are other people who should or who ought to come here earlier than you. Like, one, the shepherds who intrude and climb into the fold of their own sheep for their own belly's sake. Then, two, a second comparison is made to the same clergymen who scramble at the shearer's feast and shove away the guest. Now, for a feast, we usually invite guests. Now, only invited people appear for feasts. But here we can see that there are certain people who scramble at a feast and push away the worthy invited guests. Such people are criminals, and these criminals, here again figuratively stands for the clergymen, ought to have died and come to the judgment gate before Saint Peter. Now, the third one is again the reference to the clergymen. Critically, he calls them blind mouths. The blind mouths is a figure of, or rather image, used to refer to the clergymen who are blind to the needs of their sheep and who use their tongue not to the welfare of the sheep. Okay, blind mouths here stands as a metaphor for the clergymen, the shepherds, who are supposed to take care of their sheep, but they are blind to their needs and who do not speak good words to them at all. Now, Saint Peter criticizes in very sharp, pricky terms that these blind mouths, these clergymen, they do not even know how to hold a sheep hook. They call themselves as shepherds to the congregation, shepherds to the believers, but they do not even know how to hold a sheep hook, or they do not know what is it to be a herdsman. What is the art of a faithful shepherd? They do not know that. So, this is the next criticism that he points to the clergymen. The first criticism was that these shepherds, they intrude and climb into the folds of their sheep to fill their own bellies, stealing away their sheep's food. Second criticism was that about the people who encroach into a feast and shove away the invited guests. The third critical remark is to blind mouths who call themselves to be shepherds but do not know even to hold a sheep hook or uh, do not know the faithful herdman's art. So these people, what do they do? These people grate upon their thin pipes and feel like they are letting out music and songs, but that is not at all beautiful or melodious to the ears of the beholders. And the hungry sheep they are not fed. Now, this references again to the clergymen as shepherds. Shepherds, it is the duty of the shepherds to take care of the sheep, to feed them, and during the leisure times, usually shepherds have a flute with which they uh, produce melodious music. But here, the clergymen, as shepherds, what do? Their scrannel pipes made of straw does not emit melodious music, and whatever music comes out of it is like grating noise. And whatever sermons and advices these shepherds give to their believers is not filling the stomachs of the sheep. The sheep are not fed, meaning the spiritual lives of the believers is not fulfilled by the sermons and advices of the clergymen. So, very sharply, the poet criticizes these shepherds or clergymen as people who rot inwardly. They do not decay externally, but they rot inwardly. There is no life, they are very hollow, and they are spreading a foul, contagious disease because they rot inwardly. They are of no good to the sheep, they are of no good to the believers, and in fact, the role and duty of a shepherd is to take care of the sheep from the snatches of the hungry wolf. But what do these shepherds do? They actually let in the wolves to devour upon their own sheep. So, this is what the church is doing. So, Puritans actually criticize the church too hardly, and that is what you can see here as well. So, the poet in this long stanza criticizes the church with the pastoral image of a shepherd, and shepherd for the clergyman and sheep for the members of the church, for the believers. Very critically, he very sharply he passes a judgment on the clergymen that they are not doing anything to fulfill the spiritual needs of the people. And so, coming back to Saint Peter gives an answer to the river Camus. The question asked by river Camus was, who took my dear child? So Saint Peter says that there are so many people like these clergymen, these irresponsible priests and so-called shepherds, who ought to have been here at the gate waiting for judgment rather than this poor young shepherd Lycidas.